right.
I'm supposed to watch the camera or you?
Watch me. Okay, it's fine. They'll just have the camera on you.
Okay.
Please state your full name, date of birth, and city and state in which you live.
Roy A. Williams Senior, date of birth 11/25/1944, 190 Mount Pleasant Avenue, Stratford, Connecticut, 06614,
In which war did you serve?
Vietnam.
What was your branch of service?
Army, U.S. Army.
What was your highest rank?
When I got out, I was an acting jack, they called it, which is a specialist 5, but I wore sergeant stripes because I ran a duty section.
In what general location did you serve?
You mean in Vietnam, or are you talking
Yeah,
about
I guess,
stateside?
I guess you could talk about stateside and then where you went to in Vietnam.
Stateside, I was inducted in, forgot the place, somewhere in South Carolina, and then they transferred me to Fort Gordon, Georgia, where I did my basic. Then I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and then after about 5 months, I got a nice package in the mail saying, you have been selected to serve overseas, which is how the Army did it, which was sending me to Vietnam. So,
Well, this question says, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted. I was 20 years old, and I knew I was gonna get drafted in the next 3 or 4 years, the way it was going. I figured, let me get it over with.
Where were you living at the time?
My parents had a house at 91 Knollwood Drive in Stratford also.
Okay, so it was Stratford. Tell me about your first few days in the service.
Pretty miserable. You took a train from New Haven after you swear in, and you took a train all the way to South Carolina. I think it was Florence, South Carolina. I'm not even sure, truthfully, anymore. You do an induction center there where they treat you like a, I don't know, like a rat type of thing, you know, push you around, slap you around, keep you awake. Not physically slapping you around, just abusing you type of thing. And then after a few days, they put us on buses and sent us to Fort Gordon, Georgia, where they further pushed you around type of thing. It's basic training. They're toughening you up, teaching you things you didn't know.
How did it feel to you at the time? Was it something you could handle, or was it?
Yeah, I was in pretty good shape physically, so I could handle it. I felt sorry because they had some National Guard guys with us that were older from Florida that really took the abuse because they couldn't run, they couldn't do the things that I could do easily. So I didn't have a problem. I learned how to do 76 bars, like swinging one hand to the other, so that I could pass 400 so I get a ride back from training rather than have to walk. So things like that. So.
Do you remember your instructors? Not so
Not
much
by name,
names, but maybe how they treated you, or just in general.
Basically, they were pretty good as long as you play the game. If they told you to run, you ran. I never fell behind. I wasn't the guy in the last in line because he got kicked in the shins, you know, to speed up his pace. But I was physically okay, and most of the stuff was physical, so I could do it easily, fairly easily. I'm not trying to say I'm a great athlete, but
Right.
I was proficient enough that it wasn't a problem doing it.
Was there anything you used to help you get through basic or boot camp? Any, constantly think about something, or was there anything that, or you just took it day by day?
Yeah, I took it day by day. I really didn't have a real problem with it type of.
Okay.
Other than, like you say, it was a little more abusive than you expect, but I never really was garnered most of the, again, because I did what I was told in a timely basis. Some guys had trouble doing, like running a mile. It's not so easy for a guy that weighs 240 pounds. I probably weighed 170 then at 6'1",
Right.
It's a different deal.
After boot camp, where did you go?
Well, I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and that's where I got my orders. I was there about 6 months, and I got orders to report to Fort Lee in Virginia for a battalion move. We were combat engineers, so we were moving the whole battalion, equipment and all. I don't know how the equipment got there. They flew us to the West Coast on a, we were nonstop. It didn't exist for the U.S. Army. It was 3 stops to get to California in a plane. And they stuck us on a pier in California until the ship was ready. And then they loaded us in the ship, and somehow the equipment ended up in the ship. And we went off for a nice 23-day cruise over to Vietnam.
Oh,
ship, and it stopped once in Guam, I believe it was. And they took us, they gave us a chance to go to Gab Gab Beach, which was a great beach, gorgeous beach. You'd love, I mean, it's, water's 30 feet deep, and it looks like it's 6 inches, it's so clear. The problem was, the US Army gave the guys all the beer they could drink, and after 21 days on the ship, anger breaks out.
Oh.
And there was, I guess because the emotions of going to Vietnam,
Yeah.
and the fact that you've been cooped up for 21 days, it was a bloodbath between people that were gonna fight on each other's side
Right.
at one point. But that's what, like, 20 years old, 23 years old, most, there was some sergeants around, but they kind of avoided that. I mean, they don't wanna get in the middle of that.
Right.
You know, it was most of the young guys.
So those tensions were high.
Tensions were extremely high, yes.
Okay, what were your first impressions of Vietnam when you got there?
It's a good question. They took us from the ship in a landing craft, like, just like you see when the Marines or the Army would hit the beach
Storming
in
the
World War
beach,
II.
yeah.
We weren't storming it, we were
Yeah.
well
Right,
protected.
yeah.
But that's what kind of boat they landed us on. And then we moved from there by truck to where we were gonna sleep. First night, we slept in pup tents in the pouring rain, which meant water matches and all your stuff was getting washed out of the pup tents. So it wasn't like going to a high-class hotel, let's put it that way.
Right.
It was rather different.
What was your assignment when you got into Vietnam?
Well, we were first assigned, we were combat engineers, so we were assigned to the Big Red One, which was in Phu Loy, which, where they were located. And so we were building roads, different, I mean, when I say roads, they're building paths and then putting down ladderite so you can move trucks and vehicles inside the post, in the post. There, we were treated just like them. We were guard duty every third night, spent the night in a bunker, you know, and, that type of deal, you know?
Well, that would lead me to the next question is,
Yes.
did you see any combat?
Well, yeah, on occasion, matter of fact, I had a guy, you slept 4 in a bunker. You have 2 machine guns, you've got an M70 grenade launchers, and of course your rifles. And we take turns looking out the one hole, and the other guys would try and get some sleep, because it was all night.
Right.
And one guy was looking out when a claymore went off and took his head off, basically. So he fell back into us, and we unfortunately got to hold him until he died, you know, until they could bring medevac in. Then they brought tanks, and I mean, they hit it. You're talking about the Big Red One, you're talking about a huge division of combat soldiers. I mean, they destroyed the village where this came from, but nobody really knows where it comes from.
Right.
It could be one guy crawling through the dirt, you know.
Did this man pass before the medevac came, or?
Yeah, well, we couldn't tell, truthfully, I'm not a doctor, but
Right.
he was, I don't wanna get too graphic, but he was swallowing his tongue, he was bleeding excessively, and was non-responsive, so we don't know if he was dead or alive, truthfully, I mean.
Right.
We're not trained to, yeah, not even thinking about putting your hand on his heart to see if it's pumping or any of that
Right.
stuff, you know, we're kids, you know, a little upset at the point.
Yeah, well, that's a tough experience. Were there other casualties that you saw? Maybe not so much as graphic about that, but just in general, like, did you see casualties on a normal basis?
Oh, yeah, because they had, what you hear about today when these guys lose their legs and things, they didn't have as sophisticated as mine, but they had mines, the same type of thing, landmines, kids threw grenades at you occasionally, things like that.
Okay.
We had, I have a grandson, and I remember him at about 10, and I woke up one night dreaming it was him throwing a grenade at me, because that's what happened, the kid threw a grenade at us, we dove for cover, one guy got off a few shots on him, and people say, well, you're shooting at a kid. Well, the kid's trying to kill me. He's not a kid, he's a combatant at that
Right.
point, you know, but unfortunately, we had that Cali situation where they went through this stuff, and they said, well, you shot kids. But the kids were your enemy, they were not kids like you think of kids you could hear at Bunnell High School or at Worcester, or, you know, one of the area schools.
These are people trying to kill you.
They're trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Women who came and worked, carried grenades between their legs and exploded them and things at guys. So you find out the hard way. There was some real, they give their life up and think for their cause. I'm not saying they did wrong, but certainly you couldn't trust anybody that was unfortunately from Vietnam.
Were you awarded any medals or citations or anything along those lines?
Nothing special. We had a presidential unit citation, and then we you get the normal, I think it's 3 ribbons. I haven't looked, I've got it on my wall in my bedroom, to be honest with you, it sits there as a reminder, but I don't even remember exactly what they are. I mean, you're talking 55 years ago. So, I have enough trouble with 55 days ago. So,
Did you sustain any injuries? Maybe not.
no, nothing. No, I was, knock on wood, I never had a, do you have some emotional problems? I guess you do for a while, but I never suffered that I know of from stress syndromes or any of that type of stuff.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Well, you wrote letters, and at that point, you didn't put postage on it, you'd write free in the right-hand corner where you normally put a stamp, and they would ship them home. I don't know how quickly they get there. We would get the same thing back, a care package once in a while, you know, because you don't have anything. You can't, you have money in your pocket, but it's useless. They give you what they call MPCs, military payment certificates, and you can buy stuff at a PX, but you can't buy goodies, you know.
Right.
You could buy the essentials, cigarettes and booze, pretty much. That's why a lot of these guys unfortunately become alcoholics, because it was all the beer you wanted all the time. If you weren't on duty, you weren't in a foxhole, you weren't in a bunker, you could drink. So there was a lot of internal casualties from guys being drunk, trying to run toward a line, you know. Because you get complacent, I guess, you get used to it after a while.
What was the food like?
Well, let's put it this way, one day I had ham and eggs for breakfast in a C ration can, and you heat it up and you eat it, and they're from World War II, I believe, but that lasts forever. We had ham sandwiches for lunch and hot ham for dinner. I swore off ham for the next 5 years of my life, because you didn't have, you get food, but it might be the same thing,
Same thing
4 or
over.
5 days in a row. Well, you gotta really love ham to eat that 5 days in a row.
Yeah.
And I don't really love ham, even to this day. So,
Did you feel pressure or stress during this time? And how did you handle it if you did?
not really. I don't, you know. I mean, you have, the way the military is, you're an enlisted guy, so I think I was an E1 or E2 at the time. We had a sergeant who was a career guy, he was a jerk. Pressure like that, he was a real idiot in charge. And we almost applauded one day. They were sniping the area, and he was going across the road, and he had to dive into the mud puddle. We all laughed at him. You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing, you know, you feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
We really didn't even care if he got shot probably at that point. I mean, even though that sounds cruel, but he was a nasty man, you know.
So not a lot of love there.
Not a lot of love there, no, that's for sure.
How did you guys entertain yourselves?
Well, they eventually, when we moved from Fuloy to Kuchi, when the 25th Division come over, and that was a much larger base. It was 25,000 combat troops. So we were building that base, and so there, they actually had a movie theater, and they would show movies, you know, if you were on, and we didn't do night duty with them. They didn't want combat engineers, what they called amateurs, behind them. They took care of their own, so they had their own tanks, APCs, and their own, you know, foot soldiers. So we didn't have to do guard anymore, which was a great. No patrols either, which was also good.
Did you have USO shows there?
Yeah, I saw Bob Hope.
Okay.
We actually, I'm trying to remember who he was with. It was a pretty girl. I just don't remember. It's hard, 55 years ago. I
Yeah,
didn't
but
try
you
to
know-
review it, you know.
You know, your memory's pretty good though, because you remember where you were stationed and some of the things that went
Oh,
on.
yeah,
You're not gonna remember everything, but.
Yeah, you're right, exactly.
Yeah.
No, we saw his show. It was at a different base. I forgot exactly where they trucked us over to see it. He brought, you know, several entertainers with him, but I just don't remember who it was. Bob Hope, you remember. you
Yes.
know, because he was the
Yeah,
MC.
big name, yeah. Did you go on leave anywhere while you were there?
Yeah, they gave you what they call R&R. There's an in-country R&R trip, which we went to on the coast. They have a coastal place. It was gorgeous, and it was well protected by U.S. soldiers so that we could go there. I don't want to tell you exactly what we were doing, but we were doing a lot of drinking and carousing around, let's put it this way,
Okay.
type of thing. And it was with the Army's permission. You know, because you're young guys, you
Right.
kind of need a break.
Yeah.
And so they allowed for it, they guarded you well. They kept you in control, you couldn't get out of control, but you were well protected, you didn't have to be armed at that particular. Then I flew to Japan for 5 days on R&R, which we flew with the newspapers in it, you know, there was a free paper they used to give us, once a US something, US Stripes, Stars and Stripes, I think it was called. And so we flew with that up to, it's not a passenger plane, it's sitting in a web seat on a C-130, which is a pretty good sized plane, but it's a cargo plane. So they took us to Kamsama, we went to Yokohama, Japan, and proceeded to party there for a few days.
Did you keep a journal of all, or
No, my mother saved every letter I wrote to her at that point.
did you ever get those letters back?
Yeah, I have them, they're in my basement.
Wow.
They haven't been opened, but they're, since, but they're there.
Okay. Anything else about Vietnam you want to add to? Because I'm going to talk about your life after the service, so but if there's anything you wanted to discuss about Vietnam in general.
Really, I mean, we had our mixed emotions during the time, why we were there and what we're there. And of course, as it developed, it got worse when we were back stateside. But I mean, it is what it is.
And how long were you there, just in general?
1 year.
1 year.
1 year. They told me, they called me in and said you could extend for 30 days or 90 days, I guess, and we'll give you a stripe. And I says, thanks, but no thanks. Let me out of here, you know, type of thing.
That was enough.
Well, if you're gonna be a career person,
Yes.
it's an important thing to do.
Yes.
But when your goal is just to get out after your time served, you're not gonna stay an extra 90 days and maybe not come out, just, you know, for a strike.
Now you leave Vietnam and you come back stateside.
Yes.
What was that like?
Other than guys asking you questions about it, as you got to know them, familiar, it was work. Ended up working in an office because I could type. I was doing officers' records. I actually did that the last part of the Vietnam, because you're not talking about typing today like where you can correct it. You're talking on a computer. You're talking about a manual typewriter,
Yeah.
and there was no erasures and you couldn't hit the lines on the box, so you had to really type carefully because it was the colonel reviewing the officers, so they had me do that. So when I come back to Belvoir, they needed somebody to run the duty section, and actually ended up running a levy section, sending other guys over to Vietnam. You know, because the way the Army works is they send a spreadsheet down, and so we would have somebody contact Mike, Charlie, Bill, we actually had so many at a time, they were coming to the movie theater, and I'd have to sit there and tell them, gentlemen, you've all been, you know, levied for overseas duty. And then you have to interview them to see who possibly shouldn't go, maybe because of family, because of illness or whatever. So you always get a percentage that are gonna say, no, I can't go. Well, one guy couldn't go because he was promised to play the trumpet in the Army band. Now, it didn't bother him until he got levied, and, you know, things like that. So, yeah, good luck for you, see ya, you know, that kind of thing. You don't have a lot of compassion for them, you just did it.
Right.
So,
When your service ended, and you're being discharged, what are your feelings?
I was happy to get out.
Like, just never thought about going back, right?
No, I had plenty of chances to enlist, get extra stripes. I was an E5 in 3 years. The highest you could be as an enlisted person is E9. They selected me to go to officer candidate school if I wanted to, and I said, no, thank you. You know, if you're gonna be career, yes, you might have made some
Yeah.
different moves or changes, but my whole goal was just to get rid of stripes and go to civilian.
Now you come back to Stratford at that point, when you're done? What was your homecoming like there?
No big deal. I got out on a Friday, I went to work at Interstate Uniform on a Monday, because a friend of mine had lined me up with a job. Well, you wanna make some money, you gotta remember, when I was in basic training, your pay was $60 a month. When I was overseas, I was making somewhere around $135 a month. Taking none of it, because I didn't need it, it was just all being sent to the bank at home, because I had no place to spend money.
Right.
So, I had built up some savings, but now you're a kid, you want a new car, you want this, so I got a job and got a new car.
You didn't need, basically you had the weekend, and that was
I had
it.
the weekend and went to work, yeah.
And how long did you stay at that job for?
About 2.5 years before I got laid off, or 3 years before I got laid off.
Did you ever go back to school at any point, when you were done, or no? Just,
Well, what happened is, let's see, that's 67, 68, it was in 74, I decided to go into financial services, so yes, you gotta get license training. I went on, became what they call a chartered life underwriter, which was a 5-year program of schooling. It's not classroom schooling, it's pretty much self-taught, but exams, so if you don't pass it, you do it over again. So
did your service have any impact on paying for that, or no?
No.
No, okay.
No, I never tried to take advantage, I don't, they probably would have, but it wasn't excessively expensive, it was mostly self-study classes. This is before computers, so you're reading books, type of thing, you know.
Okay. Did you make any real close friendships in the service?
Not a one that I have contact with today,
Really?
not a one. For a while, you contact people at the beginning, and then, you know, one guy's from Maine, another guy's from Virginia,
You fade away?
they kind of fade away, that's
Yeah.
what happens. Yeah, we're gonna get together. We did get together in Virginia with a bunch of guys one time. Department of the Army Civilian had a nice place out in the country. And so we got together, and of course, none of us remember what we got together about, because it was excessive drinking, that type of stuff. You know.
Sounds like it.
Well, yeah. The Army trains you to drink in those days. Truthfully, they have the NCO, they have the EM clubs, they have the NCO clubs, they have officer clubs. What are they saying? Well, when you get done with work, go drink.
When you're downtime?
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
Drink
so,
and smoke in those days. Smoke cigarettes, not dope.
Yeah. So you said you got into financial services, which is still what you're doing today, right?
Right.
Okay. How do you think the military experience influenced your life?
I think discipline-wise, getting up early, responding, right, I mean, to this day, if somebody says, well, you gotta be somewhere at 4:30 in the morning, I have no problem for me. I just get up and go, you know, I mean, so I think it's helped me that way. Perhaps, it's hard to say, I mean, truthfully, but,
Well, we had a Marine in here who said that their discipline impacted their life even to this day, what they do and what time they get up, what time they make their bed, you know, stuff like that. It's
well,
just-
you do certain things because you get in the habit. And you get, in my case, it was 3 years habit. I guess the longer you serve, a Marine, most of them, they were at least 4 years.
Right.
So, yeah, you develop habits. Some of them are good. I'm not
Saying
knocking,
they're
I'm not
wrong.
knocking the US Army or
Right.
service of the military. You know, I don't want my grandchildren to do it, but if they wanted to do it, I would support them in their decision, absolutely.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I'm a life member of the VFW. Do you need to do something?
No, just close the door. That's fine.
You know, I'm a life member of the VFW. I pay a dues to American Legion, although I don't go there. I just support them. I send money to the USO because they were very good to us, helping you out. If you needed money to get home or you needed something to eat, they took care of you. So I occasionally send them some money. I'm not saying I knock myself out with them, you know, but I do send them. And the VFW, like I say, it's a life membership, so I still, up until COVID, we used to go Wednesday nights to play cards down at the Post in Stratford.
Anything you'd like to add about all your military experience? Not so much Vietnam, but just in general. Would you recommend it to somebody, or?
Yeah, I would not discourage anybody from serving. I think that's one of the things that, I don't know, I gotta watch, we got young people sitting here, but I mean, truthfully, getting rid of the draft, I think, hurt our country. I think knowing you had a draft and you had to serve 2 years, so what? To me, you live in a great country, and why not give back for 2 years of your life? I have no problem with that, and I would have no problem if they reinstituted the draft. I mean, maybe two people sitting here might not like that idea, but it's service of country. I think Israel does it to this day. You have to serve a certain period of time. Doesn't kill you.
There are countries that do mandatory military service.
Yeah, I think that's the only one I can think of that used to be that way. I'm not sure it is today, but I think it was a mistake, truthfully. You know, I happened to join because it was hanging over my head. Maybe if it wasn't hanging over my head, I would never have joined. I don't know. It's hard to say what you would have done. But I think we made a mistake getting rid of it, truthfully. I think there's nothing wrong with serving our country. We have a great country, although it's hard to understand listening to the news today that you do, but,
That's definitely changed.
yeah, it's definitely changed and not truthfully for the better, I agree, think, that's my opinion,
Right.
personal opinion, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but that's the way I feel, I don't like it, what's going on.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your service, taking the time to be interviewed today. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, yeah, no problem.
And, we'll get back, we're gonna get back to you